Could wheat be resistant to slugs? Well, that's a question that scientists have been asking since they did some feeding trials on an old landrace variety and found that slugs consistently sperm them. So we heard about it at BOFIN and thought, well, this will be interesting for a farm trial. So they multiplied up the wheat and we started doing field trials to find out. And we've also been doing some more feeding trials at John Innes Centre to establish whether slugs really do consistently sperm the wheat. And secondly, to look at some other wheats as well and see how they compare in the same feeding trials. So we started the trial in autumn 2022, and unfortunately that was a particularly dry year and there were absolutely no slugs in the plots. But what we did do is establish that the trial that we had put in place was exactly the right sort of trial to get the results that we wanted. Here's a bag of Watkins 788 wheat, about 20 kilograms is what we used in the patches. Each patch was about 24 by 48 meters, so 2 tram lines really. And then here's a variety that was bred by John Blackman, and he discovered back in autumn 2020 that slugs ravished his entire patch, apart from just one line. So we repeated the trials in autumn 2023, this time with 8 Slug Sleuths, and this video is going to take you through the results that we got from those trials as that project now comes to an end.
We're on Graham Potter's farm and he's been doing a slug trial looking at whether this is resistant to slugs. Now the interesting thing here is, now this is a landrace variety, so you can see that it doesn't stand up very well. But just the other day, Graham took his topper through half of this patch and he cut it down to the ground. Let's go and see what the result is over here. So here we are. Here we have, this was flat on the ground. He cut this to the floor just the other day, and look how it's grown back. Now, we don't know whether this wheat is resistant to slugs yet, but it's got some remarkable qualities that we're going to find out.
Well, that was quite a revelation. It did show some interesting results, however. And we had some interesting results from the feeding trials too. Let's take a look.
We ran 2 sets of assays in the lab using lab-reared slugs and also the slugs that were sent in by Slug Scouts. And you can see here in the lab-reared slugs, the results for Watkins 788 were consistent. So it performed as well as it did previously, consistently spermed by slugs. What's interesting is some of these other varieties, some of these commercial varieties that also performed pretty well. Have a look at Gleam and Graham there as well, performing pretty good. Moving now to the slugs collected from the field. Again, Watkins 788 performing really, really well here. If we have a look down the other varieties, again, Graham and Gleam perform pretty well. Not quite as well as in the lab-reared slugs, perhaps. X-Days, there's another interesting performer. Now, if we go down to the bottom here and have a look at the John Blackman line, now this is a line of wheats that came from a field that was absolutely ravaged by slugs, apart from this just one line from well-known breeder John Blackman. It doesn't look from the feeding trials as though it's performed particularly well here, either in the results from the slugs collected from the field or in the lab.
Well, that was really encouraging. Year 1 of the feeding trials seemed to confirm that Watkins 788 really was consistently spermed by slugs. Now, in the meantime, the scientists had done some crossing with Watkins 788 to a modern variety, Paragon, and they've created some what's called recombinant inbred lines. These are lines that are stable, but there were 84 of them to test, some of which we were going to be putting into trials in the following year. But which ones? We needed to do some more feeding trials at John Innes Centre. And to do that, we needed over 1,000 slugs. So we asked some of our friends in the media to help us.
Now, they are considered a garden menace, but slugs also decimate crops, costing farmers millions of pounds every year.
Now, scientists in Norwich are trying to find a new way of controlling them without using chemicals. And they need help to capture the slimy pests for use in their trial, as Natalie Gray reports.
Hannah Darby planted 60 hectares of winter wheat just 2 weeks ago. To her dismay, the seeds and young shoots are already being munched by the grey field slug.
Slugs can be absolutely detrimental to our business. At the time that we plant a wheat crop, for example, if the slugs come and they eat it, we don't have a crop.
Meanwhile, in Norwich, scientists at the Agritech Centre and John Innes Centre are collecting the grey field slugs so they can try to develop a wheat that they won't eat. People can help with the trial by signing up as Slug Scouts. They'll receive containers to collect the slugs and postage-paid envelopes to send them to labs. In the meantime, researchers here are growing their own colony.
If you're eating your dinner, I do apologise, but if you'd like to be a Slug Scout and get a slug kit, then you can find out more at this address, slimers.co.uk. That's slimers.co.uk.
You should come to my garden, I've got thousands of them.
Well, look, thank you so much to all of you who sent in slugs, and it was thanks to you that we managed to complete the first set of feeding trials, and we got the results from that as well. And thank you so much for sending in all your photos of your slimeries.
But most of all, thanks for the slugs, 1,751 of them to be precise. And this is where they all came from. Oxfordshire, I have to confess, are mostly the ones harvested from the slimery on my own farm over many months. But look at those avid farmers and gardeners in Northamptonshire. Thanks also to the Scouts in Norfolk and South Yorkshire, and special mentions for the Lees School in Cambridgeshire, all of the allotment holders in Edinburgh and gardeners in Somerset. Finally, big thank you to slug scouting enthusiast David Fuller-Shapcott, who sent in over 100 slugs in just 1 month, allowing Victor and his team in the lab to carry out an entire run of assays and get some really good data. And here are the preliminary results on just the first 10 rills. Well, there's Watkins 788 again, consistently spurned by slugs, but look at this. There are lines performing even better than Watkins, and that's exciting. Line 64 looks very interesting indeed. But there's a real spread of performance. Look at line 50, for example, proving to be even more palatable than Paragon. Well, that's informed which lines we multiply up and take forward to field trials next year. Line 64 as the strongest performer, line 50 as the comparator, and Watkins 788 again to build on results from this year. As for feeding trials in the lab, let's hear from Victor on the next step.
Thank you very much for sending all the slugs. It's been really, really helpful. We use them to start our own colony of lab breeder slugs. So we collected the eggs from them. We have also used them for experiments, but we need more because now we need to run over 70. We want to screen over 70 different lines, and we will need hundreds of slugs. So if you could keep sending them, that would be really, really appreciated.
Of course, the main point of the trials was the actual farmer trials themselves. So we had 7 slug sleuths who put in place traps, and they monitored the traps for about 5 weeks during the autumn. And this time, oh boy, did we get slugs. There were so many slugs because it was a very wet winter, and that's why we only had 7 trials. There was one that we didn't actually manage to establish. Those bags of wheat you saw earlier, unfortunately my trial never went in the ground. But, as I say, we did have 7 trials, again following a protocol set up by Keith Waters from Harper University, and he's been analysing the results as well. So, although I didn't manage to get a trial going, we did get a trial from Becky Berry, so let's go and find out how she got on.
I'm Becky Berry and I farm on the Oxfordshire-Wiltshire borders. We're a mixed farm with arable on a predominantly National Trust farm here on very, very heavy Denchworth blue clay.
Becky, why did you get involved in this trial in the first place then?
I'm always interested in what we can do within agriculture to sort of help ourselves rather than relying on other inputs and things, and also working with nature and trying to do what we're all trying to do in Britain at the moment is farm to our best ability, producing food, high quality food with as little inputs but using the resources we've got around us. And one of the things that intrigues me is the genetics side of it, as to what traits that we have had in the past that we haven't necessarily known about or we've been led away from. So the opportunity to be involved in something that's as scientific as this and to be able to do our own studies on farm rather than being lab-led was just what intrigued me.
Now, one of the aspects of this trial is that you're carrying out all the monitoring yourself, and that's quite a bit of work. So how have you got on with the trial this year then?
Well, so the first year we did this, we had the driest planting season. And the second year that we've done it, we've had the wettest planting season. And so this year has definitely been more challenging. A, just getting the crop in the ground and getting it established so that we could actually have a trial. And then B, getting out and monitoring it, especially when we've been absolutely waterlogged like most of the UK this year. And trudging out. So trying to pick a weather window where we might have an hour of dry for me to get out and do it was challenging. But essentially it's been fascinating because we've been able to see the slug populations and have some slugs to monitor, unlike last year, and also just to observe the rest of the activity with beetles and everything else that come with that.
Well, of course, we're all dying to find out what the results are, but what are your hopes for this project, Becky?
Well, wouldn't it be amazing if they did discover that actually across all the plots there has been some resistance to the wheat, because then we know that the scientists will be able to work and to do some editing and hopefully progress us through so that we're future-proofing that production of wheat and minimising what we're having to put on to fight with nature when we're trying to work with it.
And final big burning question, are you going to take part in the project next year, do you think?
Well, I'm hoping, given the driest year and the wettest year, that third time lucky we'll have perfect conditions next year. So yes, Tom, I will be.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Becky.
You're welcome.
So definitely a few struggles, but all in the name of science. And we did get some good positive results. So let's find out from Keith.
Well, in the first year of the project, we had very few slugs, but proved quite conclusively that farmers could take some really good assessment data fully up to the standards needed for scientific statistical analysis. Year 2, this last year, has been particularly useful though. We've had many more slugs. This has allowed us to make some really detailed comparisons between both the farm standard controls which we grew and the performance of the Watkins 788 and the Blackman varieties. And we've got some clear differences coming out. Firstly, in terms of the Watkins 788 consistently had fewer slugs in the plots than we found in the plots of the farm standard, showing that there did seem to be some kind of either propulsion or somehow some suppression of the slug populations in the areas where we grew Watkins 788. Okay, turning to the Blackmans, we had some slightly different results there. We didn't get a consistent difference between the numbers of slugs we found in the farm standard variety plots and the Blackman plots. There were some hints here and there that there were fewer slugs in some of the Blackman areas, but nothing that was really as strong or consistent as we had found for Watkins 788. And so our overall conclusion is that the Watkins 788 presents us with some very interesting results which fully warrant following up next year in a more detailed and larger trial. Blackman, we still need to think more about what's happening in the laboratory just to make sure that we've been using the correct field techniques, and then we can make our final decision. But it doesn't look quite as promising as the Watkins 788 at this point.
Well, that's a really impressive 2 years results that we've had. We've got a really good understanding of Watkins 788 and about slug behaviour and patch location. So you may be wondering, what happens next? Well, we're already underway with a new project, Slimers, strategies leading to improved management and enhanced resilience against slugs. It's a 2.6 million, 3-year project with 5 industry partners. We're already underway. We've got some really exciting work underway as well, looking at patch location and also autonomous slug control, moving away from reliance on slug pellets. And we need your help. Sign up to be a Slug Sleuth. where those people who are being paid to do on-farm trials. Or become a Slug Scout. We need more slugs for the feeding trials to carry on. And join the Slug Circle as well, where the discussion is going on, where you can find out more about slug control, get advice and share your experiences. But most of all, we really need more slugs. So do become a Slug Scout. Wouldn't it be better if those slugs are put to good scientific use rather than eating your crops?